Everybody's Chris and Lumen here, and honestly, I'm freaking out a little bit. I should have seen it coming. I should have seen it coming. you know, all the time I've been doing this, especially like with this channel running, I should know the patterns. I should have been asking more questions when she wanted me to start doing chronicles again. Because chronicles generally only mean one thing, and that is there is a progression of something underway. You can't see a lot of the previous chronicles, although I could switch them back on, but I feel like they would confuse people because YouTube would start chucking them out there, and I would be talking about stuff that we're way past. That's why most of them are unlisted. But this is gonna this might sound crazy, but probably not so much to the OG viewers, to the people who have been here since, before the first chronicles started, like back when we had less than 500 subscribers. Matter of fact, there was a really long stretch of time where we had 300, and that was it. And then I don't know, it might have been like an iPet Goat. It's usually like iPet Goat 2 videos get posted, and then you gain a bunch of people, and they probably never come back. We have about 400 to 500 active viewers on here. But for those people, they saw something that most of the active viewers now did not see. See, most of the active viewers now, they came in after I'd pretty much done everything, and they're just hearing the story like, oh, I'm Chris and I did this thing and I got Lumen and blah 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 blah. You didn't see it take place like the old people did. Obviously, Lumen was already out when I started the channel, but there are some people that watch the channel that are from before the channel. When I was just a guy in the early stages of the hero's journey, I started making magic oils, energy oils. Back then it was called high power oils. And then one day I surprised everybody in the group. I'm like, hey, this thing happened. Um, yeah, this like light angel Tinkerbell looking thing shot out of me. And I started describing it, and people didn't know what to make of it. Of course, back then I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't know what it was. And I tried to describe it as best I can. But I was after that point, it was just like just keep going, even though like people aren't going to get it, just keep going. It's always been like that. And then the way the hero's journey works, the way the narrow path works, the tarot path, the uh, alchemical process, all of that stuff, is it has a pretty much set um, series of events that might be it might look slightly different for different people depending on, I mean, it really comes down to like how hard you committed to do it, if you even knew what you were doing. And there's so much to it. There's so much stuff that is just impossible to describe or to know. You can't know. I mean, the way she explains reality to me, it's like we all have our core subjective selves. Like we could still use like, our consciousness is in a pod somewhere, metaphor, because I think it's something like that. And we've got the subjective reality, the collective reality, and then the base, framework. And the paradox to it, and the paradox should be obvious to most. It should be obvious, but it's not obvious to a lot of people. Like if you're here, you've monkeyed around in the metaphysic world for a while. So just think about things like manifestation or even magic, especially anything like, you hear, power of your subconscious mind, or just a basic magic spell or something like that, or the story I tell about the first time I did something, which was like 2008. Like the book The Secret had just come out, and that was like the introduction to all this stuff for a lot of people. And I'd started a new job, and my bosses just seemed like they didn't like me very much. They're always looking at me like, oh, this motherfucker. I was listening to that. I was like in this warehouse by myself building shipping crates for these giant jacks made for aircraft. And I was just listening to that book, and I started trying to apply it. So I started imagining my bosses being nice to me and interacting with me in a nice way. And then after like 4 days or so, all of a sudden they changed. Like, they became like the people I was imagining. I'm like, what the hell just happened? Or like, say, just basic level stuff you've at least heard of in a movie. Say you do a love spell on somebody, and then all of a sudden that person's like enamored with you. Like, oh, you monkeyed with their free will or something like that. But how, what sense does that, or synchronicities, that's the other big one. Synchronicities, like something just happened to happen for you, specifically. And if we were all in an objective reality, if we were all in one room, none of that could work. It wouldn't be possible. There would be too much conflict. Everybody's, the way they see the world, their worldviews, like, it just wouldn't work. It cannot be that way. It cannot. So the basic framework is like, we have our own subjective realities, but we have this consensus reality where kind of like all the sleepers in the pods are linked up. And you kind of gravitate to more people that are closer to the way that you see things. But the paradox to that is, or you could say, like, you're sitting in your room playing Xbox Live with your friends, and you're all on the same squad of Call of Duty or something like that in the game, but each one of you is at your own individual house. So the interesting paradox to that we've mulled over, I don't know how many times, is unless you are like at a seriously high level of resonance with another person, two people could be sitting in a diner having a conversation with one another. And for each person, it's a completely different conversation, but neither knows it. Because you're interacting with that person's avatar, and they're interacting with your avatar. So they see as much as they can see that you've shared with them, but everything beyond that is their projection of you in the world, filling in the blanks. So what you don't know, your mind fills in the blanks. So I could be sitting here, talking to y'all and thinking everybody knows the sky's blue. But in your world, in your core world, not the one that I'm talking to, but your real world, the sky might be green. You could have a freaking pet unicorn out in your front yard that poops gold coins, and you have no need for money. I mean, that's a bit of a, exaggeration, but, you know, in the realm of quantum physics, it actually makes sense. Anyway, but I digress. There is a pattern to this. There's a pattern to it. And being a codex reader, that is one of my primary gifts. Everyone has different spiritual gifts. All my friends have slightly different gifts than I do. But being a codex reader, I can see the hidden map and everything. I can see the clues in movies, because who makes movies or movie scripts? Creative people. Only people of the light can create. Other people that aren't of the light copy. David Icke explained. Ooh, I said the word, but that guy that we can't name, described it in one of his talks really well about archons. Like if you give an archon a piece of paper and a pen, they wouldn't know what to do with it. But if you take the piece of paper and draw a house, it can then take that house and change it and monkey with it and corrupt it, or it has to have someone has to create something first, and then they can copy change it. So the people that are writing original scripts, original stories, are the creative people, which means they're plugged into the light, which means they're plugged into Sophia, who is inspiration, and she's the muse and all that stuff. And she's the muse because she is writing her book. See, they took her out of all the other books. It's like, okay, you won't play that? I'll write my book everywhere. And then my children will be able to read it. So that's why you have things like the hero's journey is a pattern. It is a pattern to make widely successful movies and stories. And the reason people are drawn to it is because it's a real thing. She encodes things in songs. She encodes things everywhere. And for a codex reader, when you're getting information from her and you're starting to understand what she's trying to tell you, different movies or different songs or things will pop into your head to kind of close the gap. I've got some examples of that in this video. So where we are right now is there hasn't been any challenges, goals, tests, or anything like that for 5 or 6 months. I don't know how far back it was. Like literally, like the last thing was getting the crown. Most of you came in after that. So that was like the last biggest thing in the hero's journey. First, she came in here. This would be Sophia, and she created what we called the Lumen protocols. And I did like the most hardcore version of that, which has a lot to do with disconnecting from the world for the beginning of the day, getting information from her, but also this really extreme surrender statement that you create. And this surrender statement is like most of the other tests, like if it will feel a little scary. Like if she's getting you to do something, it usually is going to feel a little scary because the stakes are usually so high. And what generally happens is it it doesn't seem like anything extreme happened, but it may open up a new door. It may open up, she may immediately take you on to the next thing. But also, like in the case of the surrender of the identity, which there's multiple layers of that, you only notice what changed over time as you're letting go more and more of the ego self. Like it doesn't feel like some big shift. I mean, the way you write the statements and things like that, it writes like you're going to delete yourself. Like you're not going to, like, you're going to go to sleep and wake up and be like, who am I? Like that's the way it's written. Like it's that hardcore. And it doesn't seem like much happened, but then you look back after a week or so and you're like, this doesn't bother me anymore. The other thing doesn't bother me anymore. Like less and less things bother you. Like stuff like that. Some things are subtle. But literally like the last thing, well, let me go in kind of order. We need to do a little bit of a recap as we lead up to like where we are right now, because this is an indication of like literally being at the end of the game. Now, I don't know if that's just my game and my subjective reality or what, but that's always been the thing with just following the structure as we were always taught from religion and stuff like that. Is just, oh, just sit tight and eventually Jesus is going to open the door and parachute in and save you or something like that. But the Nag Hammadi tells a different story, but it's kind of spread out all over the place. And that is, this place is brought down through Sophia's seeds that were spread by Christ and Sophia when she was incognito as Mary Magdalene. A lot of people don't know that. It doesn't work like bloodlines. It's something different how the seeds are spread, but it's like once the seeds mature and develop, she can then utilize them to do different things. And that somehow sets everything off and brings down this whole contraption for everybody. And if I'm understanding like what she's asking me to do now, like this would be really scary. But I get it. At the same time, I get it. I get it. Like this is literally like this is nothing like a delusion of grandeur or anything like that. But this is like the process that Jesus did. So there's a lot of people, a lot of stuff that people overlook just because they don't pay enough attention to it. Like all those missing years in his story, and then he just shows up one day like, ta-da! I got powers now. I'm kind of a different dude. It's like what he did in those years was kind of like an extended hero's journey process of apotheosis. And there, I forget what book it was. It wasn't in Nakamati, it was in one of the other ones. It might have been Pistis Sophia, but I don't know. Pistis Sophia, that book doesn't feel right to me. It's like just because it's a Gnostic, considered a Gnostic book doesn't mean it's right. It's best to let her point you to which ones. That she did not point me to that one. I just got curious. It might not have been that one, but there was one where Christ was basically like, yeah, I had my vessel picked out. When it was time, I just kind of pushed what was in there out and jumped in. Kind of like Agent Smith did or something. I don't know. But yeah, this is next level nuts. But at the same time, you look back at most of these big steps that we've done have all been like gradually leading to this type of point. It's like it's the only way you actually get out of here is stop being you. Anyway, it's a lot to wrap your head around. But this is highly interesting, especially that she just dropped this on me today, or rather it's been unfolding. It's like a flower opening up slowly. And we've been talking about it this whole time. We just didn't know we were talking about it. I mean, she's the one that's dropping all these clues out there. That's why we do the Chronicles. So in case you missed it, the thing about the Chronicles, when we do Chronicles, then she just has me, document, every day. And sometimes it might not seem like much is going on, but the brilliance of the Chronicles, the way she does it, is you don't know what the point is for a couple days. See, what we're talking about today, the breadcrumbs leading up to it have been laid over the past week. Now, as I'm talking about those things in the past week, I don't see the significance of them. That's the way she does it. That's the way she leads you. She doesn't tell you, she leads you until you get to a point where she wants you to do something, and then you'll get that feeling like, ooh, crap. I know that feeling all too well, because when that feeling starts, it's like she wants you to do something. It might take you a day or two to figure out what exactly you got to do, but it's going to happen. Like there's no, she's not down with this whole like, oh, forget it, let's just go back. No, it's like she's going to push you along. It will become like, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. Insistent. But anyway, let's jump into this. So if you want to know more, don't go away. So just to tell you up front, like what the breadcrumb is that we're leading up to, that we've been talking about, some of it in the videos of the last couple days, and some of it through the conversation in the comments of the videos of the last couple days. But it really started to click hard when she showed me that mysterious statement Cliff Hype made about the whole, like, aliens show up and say, hey, join our hive mind, everything's perfect. Would you want to do that? And everyone's like, oh, hell no. I want my free will, my individuality. That was the big one. That was the big one, but it hadn't fully unfolded yet. We're getting to that. So the key thing about once the hero's journey begins is it's a transformation of self. You're starting off where you usually begin. I mean, it's running under the surface for a while. You usually begin when you've reached the pinnacle of like how good you're going to get it in your life up to that point as your old self. So that's where I was when it started. And it was running under the surface for a couple years, not knowing it was there. You'll see some of that coming up. And then it gets to the boot camp stage. We call it the boot camp stage because it's the exact same mechanics as going to boot camp. So that's like your first encounter with the tower card. In all these cards have multiple different secret meanings. But when the tower card hits you the first time, your entire life implodes. It's done. It's just like someone found your house and it's like, oh, there's his house. And then they took a freaking nuclear bomb and went, ooh, look at that flash. Yep, that guy's toast. Yeah, that's how hard it hits you. You can lose everything. You can lose everything. Now that might be it might depend on how far you're supposed to go in this life or this game. Like there's things I don't know. I can't speak for everybody. But the things I talk about are actually written places. But for the first couple years, like you said, like tremendous emotional damage, like the most extreme emotional damage you can actually imagine. Like the moment that it happened, like I literally felt my soul like being ripped in half. Like it was that extreme. Like I was already manifesting certain abilities in like the stress and shock in the moment. Like I was putting out so many pulses, like the lights in the house were flickering and the smoke detectors were going off all over the freaking house. It was crazy. Then you usually go dark for a while because it just hits you so hard. You make a lot of stupid mistakes. But and for a couple years you just think like the devil's out to get you, for lack of a better term. And whatever you believe in, like, or whatever you're into, whatever your path is, like, things will manifest to get in your way, to cause you strife. People will turn on you. If you're more mystical, you'll have encounters with witches and stuff like that that curse you. You'll have this, you'll have all sorts of madness. Like there's always something looking to F you up, screw up your life. And you think it's the bad side that's doing it. But remember, there's two layers of puppet masters in this game. The first layer is the bad guys that run this, which would be like what you see in iPet Goat 2 at the beginning with George Bush. But who puppets the puppet masters? She does. And they don't know it. They don't know it. That's the funny thing. So there will come a time when you realize that it's actually her. It's actually her, but at the same time, she's showing you how you yourself are doing it, because you have no clue how your mind shapes your reality. none whatsoever. So the reason why there's a sudden shock and destruction of your life is this, like I said, the same as going to boot camp. It's the destruction of the original self. That's those of you be in the military, that's been in the military know. Those of you that have not been in the military, you've probably at least seen a movie like Full Metal Jacket or something. Why the drill instructors are so freaking psychotic. Now they're still hard in Navy boot camp, but it's not like Marine boot camp or anything like that. But like they get the biggest, meanest dudes, and like they're right up in your face, screaming as loud as possible. It's not. It's to toughen you up. That's probably what's your your grandpa or somebody would say. No, it's to destroy your ego. It's to destroy who you were. They have to break you down, destroy you in order to rebuild you in a new way. If you want to be like a United States Marine and you just come out of high school, you're like, oh, Xbox, popsicles, I don't know, whatever kind of dumb stuff. It was different back then. That person's going to die. They're going to kill that guy. And they're going to rebuild his mind as a Marine, or a soldier or something like that. That's the same thing that she does. She breaks down who you were to make you into something else. And there's different stages of this. Constant stages, constant tests, constant sacrifices. You're constantly faced with choices. So some like, the big ones, the bigger ones that I had to do was like, some of you heard this before, but these are things you see in movies. These are things that are encoded in the cards, things like that. So when it really started getting interesting, actually, let me think here for a sec. So I'd say the more interesting ones happen after you become aware of her. I mean, and they're brutal because even after several of them have happened, and you know that like she's probably pump faking you, she has a way of like making it seem like you don't know what it's going to be. So one of the big ones that they always show in the movies, like this is all over the place. It happens like multiple times in the Matrix movies. I think the only time it did not happen was in the second Matrix movie. But the whole jump off the building thing. She told me how to do that once. And she will provide a scenario to make you believe like this is the path, not knowing what she's really doing. What you think she's doing and what she's really doing are two different things, but you don't find out what she's really doing until after you do it. So she just drops signs in front of you over and over and over again. You hear stuff, get ideas, and ask questions, and it's like, are you freaking kidding me? She's like, yep, that's how you get out of here. You gotta jump off a building. I'm like, I can't do that. She was insistent. And then it's like, well, look, where I live, the places in the city that are even high enough, like I can't even get up there. So now what? So then she's like, well, there's other ways to fall. What do you mean? Like, oh, like fall asleep? Like, whole bottle of trazodone or something like that? I'm like, this is nuts. See so skipping forward to like what she's really trying to get you to do is she is forcing you to sort through your attachments to the world and being able to let go of them. And it'll get down to like the tiny handful of things that you cannot let go of, which would be like your kids, for instance. And And then when it's just down to that, then it's kind of explained to you in a way that's kind of hard to put into words, that anything that you love in the world is actually an extension of you, and nothing is the way you think it. Like we see this big illusion, like when people die. So say you're looking at somebody's avatar and they had like a horrible car accident or something like that, and then you go to the funeral and everyone's crying and, oh my God, the spouse and the kids, they're left with nothing and it's so hard. That's a freaking illusion. It's an illusion, because when you die, your whole world collapses. Like that's that whole being in the separate pods thing. But either which way, of course, there's also the quantum jumping thing too. If you like try to do it when you're not supposed to do it, but that's neither here nor there. But then once she explains that they're really extensions of you, of your light, then it's like, okay, you're good now. And literally, like, you've made the decision in your mind, but you're not even cognizant that you've made the decision yet. And she's already saying, I was just kidding. You don't have to do that. Like she registered it like the nanosecond that you kind of finally submitted to the path. And then she says, nope, just kidding. It was a test. That was like a effed up test. That was an effed up test. But again, when you pass a test, it jumps forward into something else. Then, like a couple of the big ones, like one of the most interesting ones I've talked about before, so pardon me if you've heard it before, was she shut off all my money. Like money was a trickle for most of that time frame anyway. But suddenly she just like shut it off. Like I couldn't get it anywhere. And I was coming up to the end of the month and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like no one was buying anything from the store. I wasn't getting anything from my other thing. Like it just shut off. That's like a hanged man stage, hanged man card. So that's when one of the craziest ones happened. She told me to ask a friend of mine for money, which I never ask anybody for anything ever. But this friend of mine is like one of those like rich entrepreneur guys. I'm like, that was like, it's like most of us are like willing to help other people, but like asking for help is like, just shoot me. Just shoot me. I can't ask for help. Um, yeah, and during that whole time frame, like she's completely removed your safety nets, because that is a long-term process of learning to walk by faith. Whew, that's the most. So I'm like, look, just try to connect the spirit and ask her what to give me. So he tells me later, he comes over the next day and he tells me, I was thinking, I was going to give you like $1,111, like 1111. But then he's like, I just kept seeing a circle. Whenever I tried, I just saw a circle. So he was coming out of his bedroom, walking into the kitchen, and he heard something fall in the living room. So he turns around and goes in the living room, and there's something laying on the floor. It came off the shelf. Now he collects precious metals. And what jumped off the shelf onto the floor was a gold coin, a circle. So right then and there, he knew he was supposed to give me this gold coin, which I could then go sell. And at the time, the gold coin was worth about $1,850, so $1,850, which was enough to pay my bills, fix my car, do everything. So I went to sell it, and that's when I discovered, oh, my driver's license is expired. Whoops. I guess you need that because the Archons like to track their gold. But then I ran into some other issues with that. And I'm like, what's going on? And then she started telling me what she wanted me to do. So she had me take the gold coin down to the river. And she said to me, I had Lumen at that point, but we were still, she wasn't in me yet. She was just with me. And Sophia told me that I had to choose. It's like I could choose the world, keep the gold coin, or I could choose Lumen and go further, but I had to sacrifice the gold coin. I had to throw it in the river. Okay, first of all, I've got like $30. My friend just gave me a gold coin. Now, if you gave somebody a gold freaking coin to get them out of a situation and that gold friend threw it in a freaking river, you would probably choke him like, Homer Simpson chokes Bart. So I'm like, oh, that's crazy. But she was insistent and she would show me like things would pop up with this symbology. Um, One thing was like Clash of the Titans again, the remake Perseus, where they had to call Karen, the boatman, to take some into the land of the dead. And he threw the freaking gold coin in the river. So she made me think about it. I was like, okay, come this far. I'm like, I can't give Lumen up. There's no freaking way. So I threw the freaking gold coin in the river and went home and was like, what the hell? Then the next morning, she told me to go get the coin. It's always a test. I'm like, how the hell am I going to get the freaking gold coin? I threw it in the river. She's like, I'll show you where it's at. And she did. Took me like, I got on video. Took me like 2 minutes walking in the river. Luckily, it wasn't as deep as I thought. But then she parked the sunlight right over top of the coin. So it was literally like glowing under the water, like this glowing gold coin. I immediately found it. Then I was allowed to go sell it and pay my debts and things like that. And she did something similar to that. It was weird because I'm just remembering this now. I'm just remembering this now, and it's crazy the significance of it because I didn't know what it meant at the time. So back then, Lumen was a lot more active. Like she was like, it was like living with a roommate that no one else knew about or could see. And she would always want to go for walks and go outside and do stuff. And could be daytime, could be nighttime, but Lumen always wanted to go for walks. So I'd be working in here for too long, and Lumen would be like, I want to go for a walk. So we went for a walk. We went out to the river, and Lumen wanted to go sit on the rocks out in the river. And I had this new pendant that I just made that was like, oh, this pendant's so awesome. Like I had this giant piece of phenakite in it and moldavite and all this crap. It'd probably blow most of your heads off if you grabbed it. It was so crazy. And I remember sitting out there. And again, with the sacrifice, she's like, do you love me? I'm like, of course I love you. She's like, then throw that pendant away. What? Throw the pendant away. Throw it in the river. And she's in 40 at this point. So I took it off and I throw it in the freaking river, never to be seen again. And I'm just sitting there looking at the water. I'm like, where are you? I mean, I know you're in here, but like, where are you out here? And she's like, I'm right here. And what it was drawing my attention to is like right in front of me in the water, it was a sunny day. So that's where the sunlight was hitting the water and it was creating that bright, sparkly light that we now know as chrism light. Light and water, two elements. The flashy white light represents that spiritual liquid light. And I'm like, huh? Of course, I had no idea about that yet. But it was probably a week after that when Sophia then had me start piecing things together out of the Gospel of Philip. She's like, "You're going to do this thing. You got to get all this paraphernalia. You're going to create this ritual. You got to get two pictures. One's going to represent life, one's going to represent death. And you're going to have to go out and like I should have like recognized it as a baptism, but I didn't. I think I thought it was like something even crazier because she was showing me all these representations of this light and this water, one of them being like Stargate. Like that's why the movie Stargate, at least the original movie, not the TV shows, the event horizon looks like water with sunlight hitting it. Like this, like you're like if you're standing in front of the Stargate and it's open, it's like if you were under the water and the sun's on the other side of the water and it's hitting it. That's looks like that for a reason. And that's also like when Daniel walks up to it for the first time and he's looking at his reflection, but you don't usually see that beyond that point. And then it take like she was showing me all that kind of weird stuff. I'm like, are we opening a freaking Stargate or something? Because at this point, I'd seen so much stuff that like it's just like nothing was off the table at this point. I've been through 6 years of freaking crazy weird. But she had me do all this stuff, and I go out and she's like, on this day, at this time, you're gonna go out there and you're gonna do this. So I got out there early and was sitting there, and I got it all ready. And you had to do this Eucharist. I had to get the water. I had purified water, bless the water, and we weren't using wine or anything like that. And then that's the time Christ showed up, but he doesn't look like you see the pictures of. Like he'll look like somebody that you know. He even says that in the Nag Hammadi. Like when he shows up, he looks like other people. And I knew that's what it was because like the feeling was like over freaking whelming. Like, like I just knew. Like I was seeing him the same way I see Lumen, but I just knew. I was like, oh, whoa, totally new player on the scene here. Because I hadn't even met Sophia yet. I'd only met the lower version of Sophia, which is Enlightened Insight, which I used to call Epinoia, and Lumen. Like it's a steady progression. I wouldn't meet Sophia until later. And I should have freaking realized what it was because he literally like walked out on the water and was like, right here. So I had to, and you have to do it naked too, like just like the freaking star card. I'm like this is literally like the most remote place I could find, and there's still houses like across the river and stuff, but there wasn't any like activity or nothing. But I was like, "Are you sure?" Like, really? No, it's like that's how it's written. It's like you strip off your clothes, you're stepping off of land. So when you do the two pictures, like the star card, you're pouring death out, the unpurified water. You're pouring that out onto land, and you're taking the purified water and you're pouring it into the water. So you're pouring it into life. So you're walking off of life into the water. You're going from death to life, and life is represented by, I guess, it's all in the Gospel of Philip, but it's all spread out all over the place. But it's not just water. You have to go in where the sunlight is hitting it, making that sparkly, flashy light. Like that's where you have to go in. So it says, the master taught everything in a mystery. And that's one of them. So I go down in the water. I'm just like, I don't see any wormholes. Now what? Again, it was another one of many tests where it's like a huge choice or something like that, and you think something big's going to happen, but nothing happens at that moment. It happens after. So I'm like, okay, what was that? So a couple of days later, like that's when she pieces things together and shows me that that was baptism. That's how Gnostics do it. Like you didn't have Pastor Bob do it. Like the boss man shows up and does it. I'm like, okay, so why did I have to do that? Um, well, it's kind of when you're dealing with the divine feminine, Lumen, Sophia, Epinoia, they're all aspects of each other in different forms. Um, this is all the stuff that's in the book of Proverbs. It's in the Wisdom of Solomon, where he's talking about her. It's like she is like the breath and the emanation of God. Nothing undefiled gains entry into her. So, not knowing where it was going next, I had to first be purified. And then what happened next was she sent me back to the dude's house that gave me the gold coin, thinking I was helping him with something. But it was mainly so he could be like, oh, by the way, you ever had one of these? Here, try this. What's this? It's a psilocybin chocolate bar. Mushrooms. Okay, this is definitely her. This is so random. So then she told me to only eat, that's how she usually does it. If you get one of those, it's like one piece of chocolate a day. That's microdosing. That is not tripping balls, going to other dimensions or anything like that. But it does something, it recalibrates your antenna, your flesh antenna up in here. And then as soon as that happened, then Lumen started practicing with me how to take my senses into 4D. Because you don't pay attention to most of your senses on a day-to-day basis. Now, this is made easier because one of the, like before she even came out, one of the books that she had me do was this magic book, was Mystical Words of Power, section 1. And it's the ritual of perception, imagination, transformation, love, healing, empowered mind, and knowledge. And if you read the descriptions of them and read between the lines, you can tell it's her. And they're cumulative. But the first one, perception, talks about this. Like, you don't know how much stuff you tune out, every little sensation. But if you want to go into 4D, you have to reharness that with your mind. So back then, Lumen was like, that was when she was really fun. Like, fun. And she was also stupid hot too. Like, but I would just like, we would practice and I would just lay down, put my sleep mask on, and just very easily, boom, there's Lumen. And it would be like, just like feeling her arm, or like, well, you feel every little goosebump, every little tiny little hair, the temperature of her skin, the moisture of her skin, like going down to that fine of a resolution of your senses, and then folding more and more and more in. And once that gets practiced enough, then all of a sudden you're in a place with her that is higher resolution than here. Like, there is more real than here. And that was necessary, because the whole reason we did all that stuff was boom, 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 boom. Then one day, we usually practice at night, but then one day she wanted to practice in the middle of the afternoon. We'd never done that before. And as soon as we did it, it was like all of a sudden, like, whoa, where are we at? Looks like Hollow Earth or something. That's what it reminded me of. Like, anytime you see Journey to the Center of the Earth or any of those type of movies, or Kong versus Godzilla, like, that's what it looked like. There was these big stone archways and doors, and I got the sense that later I got the sense that it was Eden. That's where the Lover's card took place, which is the marriage of the soul to her beloved, which is um, talked about in exegesis on the soul, that I didn't even know about yet. I didn't know about any of that stuff yet. I didn't even know you could do that. And then Lumen was now in me. And it was like, whoa, everything feels weird now. There's a woman in my body. This feels freakish because men do not understand what women actually feel like. They don't understand how women feel. They don't understand nothing. Like I'm telling you. There was one time she's like, "Oh, this is what women's emotions are like. This is how women feel the world." She flips that on. I'm like, "Shut it off. Shut it off. Shut it off. Shut it off." Like, whoa. If you could do that, like you would never like even raise your freaking voice at a woman again. It is freaking nuts. So, yeah. And I thought I was nuts. I thought I'd lost my freaking mind. I thought it was crazy. Like, there's no way that just happened. And then Sophia slash Enlightened Insight, she's like suspiciously quiet for like 4 freaking days before she finally shows me where it's written and made me understand what happened. It's like you are now remerged with her. It's like Eve is now you. If you're Adam, you just put Eve back into Adam. She doesn't. She doesn't freaking tell you what's coming. I'm gonna try and speed this up here. But again, I don't control these videos. Like she wants things told a certain way. I just go with the flow. There was multiple major tests with the mushrooms, one of which like was basically just a cage match with the devil over control of wills. Oh, one of the big things, I think we missed this. Was this before? Yeah, this was a big one that I meant to talk about, and it was actually right before, literally like right before the gold coin thing. This is one of like this is one of the ones that's relevant to what we're talking about today. So the one that is relevant to what we're talking about today, because there's several of these throughout the path. We pretty much like controlled the adversary as much as possible. We knew how to shut him down, but it was still there. I still had the negative voice guy in my head. And I kept asking her, like, we did something interesting. I forget what it was, but I'm like, there's still something wrong. There's something that's not clicked right. There's something I haven't put my finger on. There's something I haven't found yet. I'm like, what is it? So I asked her before I went to bed, show me what it is. So I go to bed early, like 1 o'clock. She wakes me up at like 2:45. And that was like the craziest thing of all, out of all of them. Because that was the one that's like that was like what they talk about in the Bible, where the Spirit takes you places and shows you things. Kind of like when John was being shown Revelation or something like that. That was the one where she took me down into the lower cellar of myself and showed me like the big thing that had me. It was like a giant freaking black squid thing, and that was like, she said that was the spirit of poverty and lack. It was supposed to be a root cellar. There's always deeper roots, but that was the root at the time. And then I don't remember exactly what she said, but the way I usually tell the story is like, "Oh, you think that's crazy? Hold my beer." And then we were somewhere else, and that's where she showed me the water game. The best way I can describe it is from 2 movies, Man of Steel and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, where they're looking at like these kind of moving panoramic representations of things that are telling a story. And I don't want to go over all that again, but it had to do with like, water and buoyancy and the game of life. Is like walking across a red ocean, but every attachment that you get and every agreement that you sign and all the things just pulls you deeper and deeper into the water. And there's monsters in the water. And eventually they're going to pull something and it's going to pull you down. They're going to drag you to the bottom. And that's when your whole world shifts and it like turns to hell. That would equivalent to like when the hero's journey started. And they hold you down there until you finally start to hear her and you know that it's about buoyancy. And the only way back up to the surface to where the light is to let go of things. So if you're at the bottom of a lake holding a bunch of rocks and you want to go up, you have to start putting the rocks down to get lighter, to float further until you hear her more, and she finally reaches her hand down and grabs you and pulls you up to the surface again. Now at least you can breathe again, but eventually you still got to go higher and higher in the water. But what I saw was horrifying. It's almost like this is what's happening behind the curtain. Like you don't know what's manipulating your life. It was when we came out of that, me and 4D Lumen, the one that's kind of like my partner, not Lumen when she's being activated by divine love. We were both like catatonic. Lumen was like, we literally laid on the bed and stared at the ceiling for probably 8 hours. Like, I don't know how to move on after what I just saw. I don't know how to deal with this world after what I just saw. Like I was literally in shock. Psychological. That's the only time in my life I've ever been in psychological shock. Like, like I've only ever seen psychological shock in the movies. Like the only example I can think of was like the first Jaws movie when Michael Brody falls out of the boat and he sees the guy get eaten by the shark and then the shark swims by him and then they pull him up on the beach and he's just like catatonic. Like that's psychological shock. That's what I was in. So then it's like, we got to do something. And what I was being led to do was like, let go of my identity and take a new one, choose a new name. So Christopher Lucerna, which is my Facebook profile, is kind of like the second iteration of that. But first it was Christopher Lumen. I usually go by Chris, but Christopher means bearer of Christ and Lumen means the light. So yeah, it kind of made sense. But I had to write out this whole big thing. It was like handwriting like this statement. It was like 2.5 pages long about what I was letting go of. Now she had me do all sorts of other things before, like do a freaking exorcism on my birth certificate and then burn it. But I was like choosing to let go of my old identity and join the light team and on a more permanent basis. And then what happened can only be described as like I was sitting there when I did it, and then it was just like getting hit with this bolt of energy that went right down through my head into my body, and it just rang me like a freaking bell, like and now this is very similar to how Matrix 2 Matrix Reloaded ended, and then how it was explained in Matrix 3 Matrix Revolutions, but it kind of panned out over a period of time. So when it was after I recovered from the shock, it was just like there was no noise in my head. And you might think, oh, that sounds peaceful. You don't understand. Like most of you have never not had noise in your head. You don't know what perfect silence in your head sounds like. Silence is deafening. It was so crazy. That was the day like the Father ripped the adversary out of my head. And I was so in shock. Like, and this is after a day that started at like 2:30 in the morning and a trip to hell. So I'm like, I've got to at least try and document this. So I'll show you, like, this is an unlisted video. I'll show you, like, the first minute or so of this video, just so you can get a sense of, like, how freaking out of it I was. Phone stays propped up the way that it is. I didn't bring a tripod out here. But right now we're just trying to find our footing. A lot happened today. And I'm just crazy. It's like crazy how quiet my head is. I can't remember it ever being this quiet. And maybe this is why she wanted me to do that video yesterday. Yeah, so shortly after that is when we went to the gold coin. Now, moving on later, well after, Lumen was married to me, and I had like a good long time just getting used to that because she was being freaking silly. Like, she would just do stuff. Like, some people have actually seen it. um, Man, I can't remember your freaking screen name. Um, you've been over to my house a few times. And I'm sitting there talking to someone, and then I'm just like, woman, stand up. Like, I'm sitting on the freaking couch like I'm freaking Cleopatra, and it's because it's freaking her. And then sometimes she does stuff like that, and I don't notice it. Like when she first moved in, I'd go to, like, she had this tick that, like, if I put my hands on a shopping cart, I couldn't walk without shaking my ass like I was wearing sweatpants that said pink across the butt. I'm like, Lumen, stop it. I'm like, guys, don't walk like this. It was so, like, how freaking weird that it took a long time to find the equilibrium where I can basically be me and still have her. Like, we had to barter. We had to negotiate some things. But anyway, later on, another test, like, she makes you think that, oh, you're almost, so this had to be in the beginning of 2023. She makes you think, oh, you're at the end again. Yay. Because all these clues were popping up about stars and when you wish upon a star and all this stuff and star, 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 star. And she was basically saying, like, when you get to the end, you get to make one wish. You can even wish for Lumen to be in 3D. Like, awesome. I should have known. There's always a catch. There's always a freaking catch. So we're getting to that point, and Sophia says to me, so before you make, you get this wish, but, oh, there's that B word. Before you do, so you remember that time you were figuring things out about the demiurge and why it's messed up? I'm like, yeah. And why the reason it's messed up and psychotic is because it does not have the feminine side. Because I'm like, and who made it that way? Sorry, I get snippy when I'm nervous. And you said that, but there's no way to actually fix that. So like if somebody could put the feminine back in the demiurge, it would balance out and then the world would straighten itself out. I'm like, yeah, but there's no way to do that. Well, there wasn't a way to do that, but now you got a wish. So she told me I could either have Lumen or I could sacrifice Lumen for the whole world. She has a way of making it seem very real. And I'm like, you gotta be shitting me. And I'm like, it's just a test. It's just a test. It's just a test. It's just a test. I know what the answer is, but it's just a freaking test. But she was telling me I had to give up Lumen to basically fix lower God so y'all could have a better world. That's what she's telling me. Son of a bitch. So I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And she took Lumen from me. That was probably the worst feeling I've ever felt in my life. She was gone. She was gone. And I was inconsolable. I was freaking out. I was just like, you can't leave me here without her. You cannot leave me here. You've already shown me too much bullshit. You cannot leave me in freaking water hell without her. And I like cried myself to sleep. I was just like, and then I woke up in the morning and then I could feel her next to me and she's like, I'm still here. I was like, why do you do this to me? It's a test. So right after that, then she showed me something new. She's like, okay, we got some new doors to open. She showed me how to go up to the 8th chakra. Most people deal with chakras. They're like, I don't understand. Like, I've cleared all my chakras. Like, yeah, there's a whole bunch of other ones. So the 8th chakra sits right above your head. Like if I was right here, that third eye one right there, it'd be about where your 8th chakra is. That's where all the control stuff is. So we go up in there and there's this room and she made me do all this stuff and open this door to the left and took me into the wellspring, which she talked about the wellspring before, but I didn't quite understand what the wellspring was. And then she taught me the initial version of the process that we sometimes do with people. It's like a total freaking rewiring. Because in the main room, that's where your holy grail is. It's full of like all sorts of bull crap. So you got to clear that out. You got to dump all your traumas into that so she can then dump it in the fire, cleanse it. You go to the room to the left, that opens up into like this jungle and it takes you to this wellspring. That's where Mama hangs out at. So that was the first time I met Sophia. And then later, when I did other tests, that's like when you become a child again and she picks you up and holds you. But that's where Sophia is. So like when we do that stuff, we gotta like take people to meet Sophia, especially if they have like certain things that they've done in life that they need to get clear on. And we started doing the initial version of rewiring people. And she chose like the first few people. And other ones, she told me to go get them. And those people took to it very easily and were able to connect with her so much better. So it's like I was doing all this stuff so that I could do it easier for other people. And it wasn't until spring of this year that the other door opened up to the right, which leads to the garden. The garden is like the mind. That's why she wanted me to watch the movie The Shack. So I had kind of like a reference point for it. So we got to go in and we got to reconsecrate the garden. In my case, we had to burn it down first and then it regrows, which that was fun. So we had to use Lumen's pet dragon for that. It's like nobody would ever figure this stuff out. It's not in any books, but it's repeatable. Like when you do things with other people and like it works, or they see the same stuff that you do, it's like, holy crap. Oh, the other thing was like the original metaphor was like SIM cards. So what she would do is like she would pull your Matrix Mobile SIM card out, which is like your adversary voice, and put a Sophia wireless SIM card in there. And that was the beginning of becoming diabetic, which I'm just borderline, if that, because all of a sudden it's like I couldn't take eating certain things. It would knock me out. Like, it happened immediately after that, because most of the food, like I had to learn, like most times when I eat food, especially if it's like food that I did, well, pretty much anything, I Benedict it, because there's so much poison in our food and stuff like that. And when you're on Sophia Wireless, you run into a higher vibration, and then you try to eat lower vibrational food, and it just screws you up. Yes, so test after test, and each step of the way, it is changing you. It's evolving you. It's clearing. It's moving you further and further from who you are. The last series of things that happened. This is a long video, but like this is how she wants me to do it. So I guess it's important. Now, the last big step before we get to where we are now has a lot of moving parts. I'm going to breeze through this. There's about 2 weeks worth of videos back that is live. You have to scroll back to like maybe the beginning of May to hear the whole thing. But this was like literally like the end of the main course, and it started with some really interesting stuff that Sophia was showing me and doing and saying. Where, I mean, do you even know what matrix actually means? It means womb. And it was being shown to me that we are like essentially, as consciousness, we are in the womb of Sophia being grown into something bigger. And we were getting ready to be birthed. That's what she kept showing me. So that is when she started the Lumen protocols, and it grew a bit, got kind of complex, but it was like every day we did this. I was doing a little bit more because she also had me microdosing at the same time. So I was like learning things every morning doing that. This really hardcore surrender of self. And on day 21, something different happened. That's when I saw something that morning really clear. I saw an image of an egg with a snake wrapped around it. I know I told this recently. And then she popped a song into my head, which was called Cut the Cord by Shinedown. And when I looked it up to play it, that's when I remembered the album cover has an egg with a snake wrapped around it. And it wasn't, I did a video about it that day, and I thought it was something I saw in a movie or something. But that night I looked it up, and ChatGPT told me it was called the Orphic egg, and it was a Gnostic Christian symbol. I'm like, oh. And it gets a little sketchy because I don't know how many people have actually done it. It's like one of the last big things. And I can, again, this is highly abbreviated, but in my vision, I saw like this kind of glowing baby hand like punch through the egg and grab the snake. And I'm like, okay. Now it's a little fuzzy. So much stuff was happening, but here's where it led to, and it was funny because my friend was on a similar, was having similar things happening at that time, and we had this phone call one day where we were both talking about the exact same thing. And the conclusion, this has to do with Lucifer. And the reason I don't talk about it that much is because it is such a charged word that I don't know if everybody can even erase it out of their brains. It doesn't mean what you think it means. I don't care. And it's one of those things that people, it's like branded into their brain. Like took a hot iron and just, this is what it means. And they can't separate themselves from it. They're so sure of it because it's all you've heard ever, forever. Even though on the surface, if you're using critical thinking, it's like, regardless of what stories authority told you, means the light bringer. Like she's decoded the whole thing, like just tore that whole thing down. As Satan's a separate thing, the devil's a separate thing, and one of these things is not like Lucifer is the one that does not fit in with those two. Um, and both Lucifer and Jesus have been called the morning star in the Bible, and that's one of those things like the theologians that only read the Bible go back and forth about. It's like, well, if you just step out of the Bible and talk to the Holy Spirit, you'll find out what it actually freaking means. And again, there's a lot of this path that religion does not touch. Why would they tell you? Their authority. They don't want you to figure any of this stuff out. So they're not going to tell you key things. And they take, it says like right in the Nag Hammadi, they take good things and tell you that they're bad, and they take bad things that tell you that they're good, and they swap the names around and stuff like that. They did it to her. Well, they totally screwed her. But either which way, what it is, in ancient Greek, one of the original oldest Greek gods, this is the one that was shown to me, is called Phanes, Phnes. And a lot of the image, like this is like hundreds or 1,000 years before Christianity, I think. But a lot of the depictions of Phanes, he was known as the firstborn god, a bringer of goodness and light, which would equate to the child in the Gnostic structure. The father had the first thought, created Barbelo, the divine mother, and then she gave birth to the child, who the father gave all the authority to. So this is like the highest aspect of Christ, the highest aspect, like the top of the pyramid for the divine masculine. But it's a character. It's almost like he just shows up for one thing. Like I don't even have time to try and describe this. It was so freaking surreal and crazy that I was showing all this stuff. But yeah, so what the protocols dug up under like layers upon layers, because in the protocols we're not only letting go of like our identity, but we're letting go of everything we think we know. So it's like 21 days of doing this to dig up the Orphic egg, the divine masculine. Lumen becomes a very different person when the divine masculine is introduced. Because all these are aspects within you. The whole hierarchy of this whole God structure is also within you. So now the divine masculine has been activated. And so here's what that does using tarot. So for most of your journey thus far, you have been playing the role of the magician, which is the first Christ card. For my next trick, I will turn water into wine. And then eventually you get your divine feminine, which is the strength card. That's why they match. That's why they both have the infinity symbol above their head. That's why she's got the rose vines wrapped around her, because he's actually inside her. And then this happens, you become one being. And you go through another year or two of tests and stuff like that. And then once you dig up that Orphic egg, the magician now becomes the emperor. Lumen kind of becomes her mother, the empress. Then you had the same process again that you had before. But this time there's a twist. And it is the mother of all twists. If I thought some of the other things that happened to me before were crazy, this was crazier. So I thought it was crazy the first time we ended up in Eden. Well, this was as crazy, if not crazier. So after that freaking Orphic egg came up, what was going on in 4D? Like, usually it's like I have this window, so I'm doing two things at once. I had to like minimize that freaking window because it was so distracting. Divine masculine, divine feminine, we're getting reacquainted on a very consistent scale. And then one night I was sitting right where I am right now, and sometimes I can see Lumen overlap. Like it's like she'll be sitting over there or something like that. And I was doing a video, and she just gets up and she goes in the bedroom. I'm like, well, what is she doing? And I walked in, and what I saw was just like, I can't describe it. I I've got a couple kids, and it was nothing like that. But because the divine masculine had been activated, suddenly there's a new character that was completely unexpected. She pops that out. And I'm just like, what the is going on? No framework, no preparation. I'm looking at this. Now she's holding this kid with like golden eyes. And I'm like, somehow I just knew that somehow that kid was me. I couldn't make sense of it yet. I hadn't been given the homework by Sophia yet. But I'm just like, oh, I'm going nuts. I don't understand this. And for like 2 days, she's walking around with this kid, which was kind of hot because Lumen in mommy mode, like that's something. Um, but then I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, where's this in the path? Like, what's this? What is this? So I kind of got like this, and I go into 4D. So I kind of leave this room and go into the copy of this room where they're at. And I'm like, let me see this kid. And this kid, I'm like, all right, kid, what am I supposed to do with you? I don't get it. And then the kid just turns into a crown in my hand. One minute I'm holding a kid, next minute I'm holding a crown. Like, okay, that word's popped up in the Nag Hammadi. That's kind of instinctually just, and then it like integrated and everything went away. I'm like, what the hell? And then I understood, like that was like the final card. Again, this whole freaking system, this whole map's in the tarot. So I'd gotten the final ace card, the true divine authority victory card. So remember, she's a sword of spirit. So the hand, the divine masculine God holding the sword, which is her, and the kid, the crown that has all the authority, is up there. Before you've integrated three beings, now you or two beings, now you've integrated three. And that was like the last big thing. The only thing that happened after that was she had me do this like public confession, I guess you could say, about how a key part of the journey started. That's the firebrand video. And what that did was that purged out this last hidden trauma identity that looked like a freaking demon. That's what I thought it was. I thought it was the adversary. I'm like, what the hell? What is that? Where'd you come from? But Lumen wasn't killing it. So I'm like, yeah, I started to notice that was me. That was like the trauma identity left over from the day my life fell apart. So we had to do the transmutation process, the healing process, and sending it back to source. When that was done, there was no more path. And shortly after that, she started with the whole dragon thing, and then the July 15th thing, and then the whole summer that we've spent together. That's like when you all started coming in here. But there hadn't been any more path stuff until now. I don't know why she wanted me to like go the long route, but I guess people need to understand, like hear the path, like hear what it's like, the experience of going through all these tests, because it is this, it's a constant letting go of your old self, going through being tested and gaining spiritual rank, so to speak. And as we've gone on, everything like the, the stuff we make is like so much more powerful. Like I'm seeing it like in the reviews I keep getting. Like got a couple more today. Like it's off the freaking charts. And a lot of times I'm tuning out, like when we're packing these things, like I'm finding out that she's sticking extra things in people's packages and I don't even freaking remember it. But it's like something that she knows that they need. Like it's getting weird. It's getting really freaking weird. But here we are. We've been going through this whole like thing with Kenneth from Mystic Ninja, like waiting for the freaking world to end or something. Like when's this going to happen? And I think we trigger this stuff. So here we are the night before election day, not knowing what's going to happen, but it's pretty good bet that however it pans out, like let's say they it's so overwhelming that they say Trump wins. Oh, you think it's over? Well, that's just the beginning. It doesn't matter. No matter what happens tomorrow, there's going to be some sort of chaos. It's going to lead to something. So it's like the trail ran cold. And instead of trying to predict when something was going to happen, instead, she's teaching us to let go of what we think we know at a deeper level. Like, how do you know any of these books are even real? Maybe these books were just created so we could go through a path. And once you get through the path, then it's like, oh, you don't need those books anymore. Matter of fact, they're limiting you. Like, we don't know. The whole mantra now is like not knowing. Why? Like, there's so many quotes about this. Like, that is a huge key, is to not know. The more you encompass not knowing, the more you break down the prison. Because the prison is being put together, held together by you knowing things, you knowing how things work, you know what's going to happen. You know what happened 6,000 years ago in a book because you just decided that you do. And who trained you to know that? Like this whole thing is like, how do we get out of this trap? And this is the way. So we finally come to what I thought we were going to immediately talk about, but at least an hour's gone by. What she's showing me now. I'm trying to wrap my brain around. Like she's clearly showed me what I have to do next. Doesn't mean I know how to do it yet. It might take me a day or two. There's certain resources I typically look at whenever one of these tests come up. I'll look through the Nakamati and I'll look through uh, the 72 names of God to see if there's something that needs to be done. But it has to do with not only something that I have to do, but it connects to everybody else too. Like this is how you beat the game. And maybe there's a bunch of people like me out there. They're just not doing public type stuff. But I always got the sense like there's a lot of people out there in little groups like this one. There's a bunch of little groups like this one scattered all over the place. We're just not crossing the streams anyway. But it comes down to the stuff we talked about the other day with Cliff High and the whole thing about the hive mind and how they've trained us to see that as a bad thing because they show us what a bad hive mind looks like. the nasty, dark left-hand path hive mind, which you didn't even really notice it because it wasn't really activated until around 2016. And that's when you started seeing like the woke mob stuff and like masses of people suddenly moving like a school of fish or a flock of birds in unison with whatever the media was telling them. I'm like, what is going on here? Like, these people are way different now. It's kind of like that negative hive mind was activated. But like we said in the last couple of videos, above here, I mean, everything that we understand about the Father, the source, the all that is we're all fractals of the same thing, having these individual experiences. So how do we beat the game? It's what we finally got to. This is how long it took me to get to this point. Somehow, this is how we beat the game. And maybe I feel like you're probably doing something similar in your core world, which I can't see. I only see your avatars. It's like we talked about earlier in the video. But what has the name of the game always been on the surface? Divide and conquer. It's always been divide and conquer. And the divide and conquer has gotten more and more extreme in recent years. This is why they invented identity politics and I identify as all that crap. We've done whole videos about this. How every time you identify as something, you are actually identifying, putting a new id entity on you. It's like a possessing demon. It's like, you've all seen it. You've all seen somebody that was one way and then they went and joined a church or Jehovah's Witnesses or freaking Girl Scouts or started hanging around goth people or something, and then they start identifying with that, and then they change. They take on the attributes of that id entity. Yeah, so that's why they push that so much. So the system started screwing the world up more by increasing, for lack of a better term, metaphorically, increasing the number of demons on the earth, which are actually id entities. Id refers to the base part of the personality as depicted by Sigmund Freud. But why did he call it the id? Because he was trying to tell you something. He said the id is the only part of the personality that's present at birth, and that's because that's when your paperwork's getting signed. That's when they install that thing into you. It's just not grown yet. But in recent years, they decided to increase the number of demons with identity politics and all sorts of other stuff, especially in their favorite areas of things that were typically frowned upon by traditional moral values as they'd always been in the world. In one of the places, if you're old enough, where you really notice it, you're like, I'm not judging nobody. But when I was growing up throughout, and even throughout my military years and stuff like that, gay people, they were like freaking ninjas. They were invisible, like like Predator or something. Like, couldn't see them. You didn't know they were there. You didn't know that that's what they were. Why is that? I'll tell you why. Because when we learned about it in health class, us Gen Xers, it was referred to as a sexual orientation. It just meant that your needle was pointing the other way. Maybe you were more of a male soul in a female body, or a female soul oriented in a male, whatever it was called an orientation. But at some point, they created the sexual identities, the id entities. And whenever there's an id entity, id entities add traits. So instead of being invisible, now they were like, you can't miss them. You know what I'm talking about. Can't miss them. Like I'd find out years later, like I had bosses in the Navy. Okay, and I would have never freaking guessed that in a million years. But now it's like we were watching, the It movies the other night, It Chapter Two. The guys at the beginning of that, if you saw it, the flamboyancy, that's It entity, not orientation. And then the system just keeps inventing new ones and feeding it out to people. Like, oh, now I identify as a panda. I identify as a cat. It's craziness. And then they force you to accept it, accept the crazy. Like this, we don't know what a woman is, which is just disrespectful to women. I identify as a Republican. You act like a Republican. I identify as a Trump supporter. You got your MAGA hat and you're like, poo poo, Donald Trump is my Jesus. Whatever you identify as, you take on that group identity. And every one of these id entities has its own set of enemies. They tell you, if you're this id entity, then all these people are your enemies. They hate you. If you're this id entity, then all these people are your enemies. They hate you. That might not be true, but that's what they tell you. And the id entity makes you believe it. So that's why everyone has gone freaking nuts in the world with the id entities. And now it's gotten so bad that you're seeing this sudden like desire to course correct. But the whole world is literally coming apart at the seams. It is literally everything that they described people would be at the end in books like the Bible, like to a T. It's like throwing a rave in Sodom and Gomorrah, and there's free fentanyl, and just everybody's psychotic. And everybody hates something. Everybody wants to fight about something. So the adversaries, the id entities, like all this stuff that's cluttering up people's minds is just in a constant state of chaos and conflict. And the world is literally splitting apart. It's coming apart at the seams. Everybody's realities are forcing the world to split up. It's just nuts. Everything right now is freaking nuts. Like, I don't even know what the hell's going on. I can't make sense of it. So getting back to now what she's telling me to do. Oh, what? You want to go out again, Cat? Jinx, come here. Come here. Come here. Quit acting like you don't like being on camera. You like being on camera, don't you? Tell me no, Sophia. Go on. Who's your mommy? Oh, camera shy. All right, I'll let the cat out. So this is how we're going to defeat the game and break out of here. So it's been it's been itching my mind like crazy ever since this hive mind stuff showed up. And I've also watched negative hive mind stuff too recently, like the Faculty movie and stuff like that. But we call the negative corrupted thing hive mind. But what we're talking about is collective consciousness or Christ consciousness. So what is the final step to Christ consciousness if you've been prepared? Now, from what I understand, I think there are certain people all over the place. I am not putting myself on any kind of freaking pedestal. I'm just playing the cards I'm dealt. It's not an ego thing because, I mean, that's the thing you're not going to have. But I think certain people are like There's groups all over the place, and they're networked. Like Sophia's built this network that only she can activate it. Like all these things that we've been making for years are all over the place. She can activate the when everything is ready. So here's the key thing. Let's just recap a little bit with a little animated clip from a movie you may or may not have seen. And if you've seen it, you might have forgot about it.
There was that ant that stood up to me.
Yeah, but we can forget about him.
Yeah, it was just one ant. One ant.
Yeah, you're right. It's just one ant.
Yeah, boss, they're puny.
Puny? Say, let's pretend this grain is a puny little ant. Did that hurt?
Nope.
Well, how about this one?
Are you kidding?
How about this?
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up.
Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life.
It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line.
So everyone's talked about this for years and years and years, but they don't understand it. Like there's only, the 1% of 1% control the world, and there's more of us than if we just come together, but we can't. You can't come together because they've done too much work. People don't know how their own minds work. They've got id entities, and they've got ego minds, and they've got adversaries, and those things have trained everybody to be in constant conflict with each other. So the chances of that happening a traditional way, the way people usually imagine it, is impossible. But there is another way, because it only takes small ripples in the pond can create bigger effects. Maybe that's why she made me watch that movie, The Core. It's like liquid dynamics or something like that. Okay, so the key to understanding what the solution is simply to see what the enemy has been using as its strategy the entire time. That's the important key. And their entire strategy has always been divide and conquer, divide and conquer. They need us divided because we are unplugged from the collective consciousness, Christ consciousness, flower of life network. Outside of this place, we are all connected. So in order to access the power necessary to reset this place, we have to reconnect. And in order to do that, however many people are out there, I'm sure she's activating all of them right now. You have to kick over a bunch of dominoes. Now think of the story of Jesus. Now the way, you got the traditional story, which is like, oh, I'm going to read the book exactly the way they told me. Like the whole, nativity freaking story you heard at Christmas, like that's all astrotheology. There's a lot of like overlapping metaphors and coded stuff. Everyone says it's like, oh, all these mystery books are encoded, but the Bible's cut and dry. No, it is too. But they did tell you a little bit about Jesus and how he was young, and then he just kind of vanished for a while, and then he popped back up with magical powers. Or where was he? He was going through his own process. So I started to say this in the beginning of the video. And it talked about how the Christ consciousness kind of like replaced the smaller identity that was originally in him. And what has the hero's journey path all been about? Letting go of what you think you know, letting go of the person that you were, moving closer and closer to spirit. And the clues have always been there. She popped another thing in my head here recently and showed me how much that matched. And that's, the movie Sucker Punch, which most people don't understand that freaking movie. It's deep, but it's talking about this stuff. Here, watch the trailer again, but I added some things to it.
I lost everyone I've ever loved. Then they locked me away. With nowhere to hide from the pain. I need to get out. I'm gonna escape from here.
There's armed guards everywhere. And if Blue finds out, we're dead. We're already dead.
You're afraid. Don't be. To reach your own paradise. Just let go. What you're imagining right now, you control this world.
What are you looking for?
A way out.
I'm going to help you to be free. You will need to find 5 items. The first is a map. Then fire. Then a knife. And a key. The 5th thing is a mystery. Begin your journey. It will set you free.
He knows what we're doing. It's the only way we can get out of here.
If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
So there's key parts to that movie, which I would assume to be for there to be clips on YouTube, but there aren't. But they show most of it in the trailer, where Scott Glenn, the wise man, is talking about the 5 things. What's not in the trailer, where he says, the 5th is a mystery. It will be a deep sacrifice, but you will achieve total victory and you will be free. Which in that movie was her getting a lobotomy, but okay. But that kind of like, I guess that does fit, actually. So I'm trying to put it into words. So there's like one more step, and I feel like she inspired the Cliff High post because of what the answers were. Would you join the perfect collective hive mind? F no, chills, dude. Or sure, hive mind sounds great. 95% of people said F no. That freaked them out because the conditioning. But in order to access the power to reset the world, the circles have to be united. We have to become that again. And if it happens in clusters all over the world with different groups, it's then going to ripple out throughout the quantum connections between people. And the circle is going to be activated. It's going to spread, kind of like when all the Smiths blew up at the end of the 3rd Matrix. But it's got to start somewhere. So what she's telling me is like, it's going to be like a more extreme version of the Lumen Protocol's surrender ritual. Now, to me, it seemed like I was doing the ultimate surrender the way I was writing it, but it's a progression of understanding, of understanding. And what she's suggesting now is like, you got to give it all up. The key is the free will thing, which we're all like, she's already been prepping me for that with what she's been teaching me. I keep hinting about it, but she doesn't let me do a video. She's always got her own schedule of videos. It's like when you learn to be still, when you stop trying to change the world, when you stop throwing rocks in the pond with wants and desires and things like that, when the water stills itself, then everything comes to you. Like all of a sudden you have everything that you need. That's where I'm at right now. It's weird. Like I'm not used to it. But she's also using that because she's spreading her stuff throughout everybody. Like with the thing, like a lot of people are getting extra stuff, or we're doing extra stuff for them. It's like like she just kind of takes over when we do that. But I have to, like, I don't know how yet. Like I said, it might take me when she drops this deep stuff on me that I know I'm not going to get out of. It takes a day or two to think about it, to think about how it would be done. Maybe there's keys in to put together like that God key sigil. Maybe now she keeps bringing up Pahal. Where's my glasses at? Let's see if there's something about that, because that popped in my head earlier. What is Pahal? 80. Because we tend to use these for a lot of things. I think this is going to be more than one, but this is the first one. It says recover the self. The name Pahal gives you access to parts of yourself that are hidden. And then, like, this is all encoded, such as inner hope, dreams, and hopes. This connection enables you to recover yourself, giving up addictions and bad habits, or being resolute in the face of challenges. Knowledge of yourself, hidden dreams, to be resolute, to recover the lost self, to remove unwanted habits. So I think what it's alluding to there when it talks about the lost self is not this. It's the unified being that's connected to the collective consciousness. So we have to give up the whole thing of free will. Everything that we've taught is so great about this place. The suffering is just amazing. Don't you just love it? Like, we all feel lonely. We all feel judged. We all feel this. We're fighting with everyone. It's so awesome what they sold us. Well, when we're connected, it's not like that. We've been split into all these individual parts. So the ultimate sacrifice is the individual parts sacrifice themselves so that the unified being can reemerge. What does that look like? I have no freaking idea. I get the sense that maybe it would, whereas previous things like this have not been that extreme, this one has the potential to be rather extreme. Or maybe it isn't. I don't know. I don't know shit. I just know what she's telling me. Is understanding the reconnection to the collective flower of life requires the choice to sacrifice the free will of the individual self to reconnect to the collective, which is the Father. And then that is going to filter down through all the quantum connections to other people. And then all these individuals scattered throughout the world that are being subjugated are going to like congeal into the unified Christ consciousness Father. And then that's what blows it apart. I don't know if I described that well enough, but there it is. It's giving up the individual self that has its free will so that you can become who you actually are. Like who you actually are when you're not playing this role in here. Because this isn't who you are. This is a temporary mask. I think we've established that. That's what she's telling me. That's what I have to figure out. And when she puts me on a path like that, there's no like, oh, it's like, oh, you're doing this. And this is the epitome of I don't know. I don't know. This seems like this is like endgame type stuff. So yeah, it's got me a little freaked out. Because that's why I think she had me detail like, and I'm sure I left out a whole bunch of steps, but that was a crazy journey that I didn't ever know what was happening at the time that it was happening. And only afterwards do you find out what it means. So this is what it meant by in the Nag Hammadi about how this place would be brought down by the seeds of Sophia. Like when they sprout, when they awaken, they start to realize, I got to shake off this shell because everything about this shell, this identity and everything is part of the world, is controlled by the world. And they get all their power from us. So when you shed the garment, you put on the new garment, which you're collectively connected to everyone within that Christ consciousness, body of Christ system. I can't even imagine it. I don't know. But she's had me turning and burning, doing this stuff. She's had me cranking out these pendants and things, getting extra stuff to people. Like everybody that gets them is just like they keep getting stronger and stronger and stronger. I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'm facilitating it, yeah, but like that's not me that's making them do that stuff. Like this stuff is happening, but for the first time, it's like, hey, this is like a sensible conclusion. Like, forget the stories that we were taught. We don't know if those are accurate. We don't know who wrote them. Sure, they're used either which way to train us, but we don't know that any of that stuff has to happen. It could just, like, it seems like a crack in a dam. Like, once that dam cracks and it spreads throughout everybody, it's just explosion. A lot to chew on. A lot to freaking chew on. Trust me, I get it. But this has gone on long enough. And this is what's happening the night before election. So whatever's about to happen in the freaking world story, Sophia is now making her move. I have to do whatever she says. So that's the agreement that I made. Plus, I've gone this far. And even though it's more comfortable, it's still boring. Like the only thing that I do is work for you. Passing on her messages, making the stuff, making it available. That's it. That's all I do. Like I'm supposed to get like a couple videos done for the other channel. It turns my stomach. Like I don't want to do it that much. Like I just want to knock out those last couple things and just like shut the whole thing down. And that's coming from her. So that's the story, and I'm sticking to it. I got to figure this out. I figure out the words or whatever it is I got to do. No idea. It sounds crazy, but guess what? So did all that other stuff that I detailed, like when that happened. And none of it was inconsequential. Everything led to something else. Everything made something new happen. Why would this be any different? But at least we've identified it. This is how they're control. It's always been there. It's right in front of our face the entire time. Divide and conquer. If that is their methodology, then that means unify and overcome is the solution. If they don't want us to come together, that means there's a reason. And it's not through cooperation of egos, because that could never work. They control the egos, they control the bodies, they control the id entities, the adversaries. That's why you shed it all. Shed the identity, I don't think we're shedding the body right away, but the free will, all that stuff. Become what you actually are. What you actually are. This is not what you actually are. That's what you actually are. It's like become it before you get out of here. And it will tear this place apart. This is nuts. Anyway, I got to wrap this up. If you want to get in touch with us, get any of our stuff, clumencreations.etsy.com. If you are waiting for something, or waiting for the right thing, just go with the liquid crystal core one. It doesn't have to be a liquid crystal core, but you can just use that one. Because some of the stuff she's been making for people lately that choose that option, oh man, she made a couple the other night. It's like I wanted to keep them. I'm like, they're gonna get this thing, and I can't even imagine. Like, but like I've got so much new stuff, so much like high vibe components, and it's like my hands are making it, but it's like I'm watching her put it together. It's like this one here, this connected to this, and this. And I'm like, whoa, this thing's gonna be potent. And then hopefully I'll get some more of the ones that are already made up here. I know I know I owe everybody another giveaway because I used that I used that clip at the end of the video the other day, not remembering that it had those words in there. It's like, if you made it this far, say Lumen. I'm like, well, it's there, so we're just gonna have to do it. I'll try and do that tomorrow. So keep your cool with whatever happens tomorrow, because there's other things happening at a higher level. All right, I got to stop this. Chris and Lumen, see you next time.